Welcome to the Dr. Mudgil podcast. This is episode 94. We are officially in September. School has started, I think, for pretty much everyone who goes to school. My kids, as I mentioned last week, started last week, so they're in their second week of school. Can't believe it, but we're in the deep throes of the school year. It is hot here in New York. I think like August was actually like a relatively cool, like historically cool August. We didn't have like a bunch of 90-degree days. In fact, I don't think we had any days that actually hit above 90 degrees here in New York. Don't quote me on that, but I think I heard that on the news. But we've had several consecutive 90-degree days in September so far. So it is hot, but like I said, and I think I said this in a previous podcast, but I do say it all the time. I will never, ever complain about the heat. I love the heat. I hate the cold. The older these bones get, the more they embrace the heat and the more they shun the cold weather. But in this week's podcast, it's going to be kind of like a hashtag Ask Dr. Mudgil sort of informational podcast. As I'm sure all of you know, Jimmy Buffett, who is a musician, passed away last week, and he passed away of something called Merkel cell carcinoma, which is a rare type of skin cancer. So I'm going to get into that a little bit. But first, I'll talk a little bit about Jimmy Buffett. So in all honesty, I'm very casually familiar with Jimmy Buffett. I mean, I know like Margaritaville and, you know, his big hit, but I didn't really know. I wasn't like a huge fan of his music, although, you know, I'm not that I dislike his music. I just never really listened to it much. Sometimes when I'm like going through the Sirius satellite radio stations, I'll park on Jimmy Buffett station, which is channel 24, for a little while, because he plays a lot of like, you know, other artists on his station. If I, you know, hear a song that I like, I'll stop on there and listen to it for a little bit. But you know, a lot of the musicians that I follow on social media, like on Instagram and stuff, have been posting these amazing tributes about Jimmy Buffett, and he just sounds like an amazing human. I mean, everyone was just writing really beautiful things about him, his warm, generous character, his laid-back nature, and I think, you know, his music and his he had, you know, a huge number of fans called Parrot Heads, who would, you know, his concerts were like these very, very long parties. It would start with like a huge tailgate and then, you know, segue into the concert itself. And, you know, he really sort of embodied, you know, that island party, beachy lifestyle. But he actually, you know, from everything I've been reading about him, there was actually a really beautiful letter that Paul McCartney wrote about Jimmy Buffett. And, you know, it just, I thought really captured what an amazing person he was, what an amazing friend he was. And, you know, just how much positive energy and life force he brought into this world. So although I wasn't super familiar with him, I can feel how much of a loss this was to so many. And so, you know, my heartfelt condolences to all his fans and anyone who may have known him. It's a really tremendous loss. And at a young age, I think he was only 76 years old when he passed away. So, yeah, the news I think of him passing was last Friday, but then, you know, details started to emerge, and I think on Saturday, or maybe it was even later that Friday, the cause of his death was announced, and it was a Merkel cell carcinoma, which is a very, very rare skin cancer. You know, a lot of dermatologists and stuff have been posting about Merkel cell carcinoma, you know, just in the context of this news. So I'm not going to get into like all like the dirt and details about it, but you know, I will touch on it a little bit. So Merkel cell carcinoma is very, very, very rare, but it is, unfortunately, it's very, very aggressive. You know, it's more aggressive than even melanoma, which is the, you know, much more common, dangerous skin cancer. Just to put things in context, say there are like every year, like 5.6 million skin cancers, right? 5.4 of those will be basal cell carcinomas and squamous cell carcinomas, which are the most common types of skin cancer. It's caused by your skin getting beaten up by the sun through the years, lots of sunburns, tanning boots, definite no-no, increase your risk significantly. And, you know, most of those 5.4 million are actually basal cells, which is the most common skin cancer that humans get. Then there are a couple 100,000. So 5.4 million basal cells and squamous cells, most of which are basal cells. Then there's a couple 100,000, say like 185 or maybe like 200,000 melanomas, which are very dangerous skin cancers. But you could see like how rare they are relative to even, you know, squamous cell carcinomas and basal cell carcinomas. Now, Merkel cell carcinomas comprise 3,000 skin cancers in the United States. I think it's in the United States per year, which you can see it's a very, very, very small number. Now, I'll get into more of this a little bit later in the podcast, but I just want to emphasize right now how important it is to get screened for skin cancer, particularly if you're an at-risk person. So if you're a fair-skinned person who's had a bunch of sunburns, you definitely should get checked out every year. Have your dermatologist check you, a board-certified dermatologist check you from head to toe every year. With the caveat being, if you notice something funny looking on your skin, a spot that you see is like, hey, what is this? Or a pimple that's not going away, or a spot that easily bleeds, or a mole that just looks, abnormal, you should obviously break that 1 year rule. Don't wait a year to show your dermatologist. Make an appointment, get it seen right away, get it evaluated, and your dermatologist will decide whether it needs a biopsy or not to, take a closer look at matters. So that's my PSA. But let me take a step back and talk a little bit about Merkel cells. So Merkel cell carcinoma, as I mentioned, is very, very rare. Your question probably is, which is obviously a very good question, is what the hell is a Merkel cell? So Merkel cells are neuroendocrine cells that live in they live in the bottom layer of the top layer of our skin, if that makes sense. So our skin is comprised of basically 3 layers. There's the epidermis, which is the very top layer of our skin, and that has basically 5 or 6 cell layers. Then right below that is the dermis, which has, collagen and blood vessels and stuff. And then below that is the subcutaneous fat. So Merkel cells live in the bottom part of the epidermis, which is the top layer of the skin. And they're most prominent in areas that we use for touch sensation. So they're very prominent on the hands and the feet and lips. They're present throughout our body, but that's where they're in the greatest density. And what these cells do is they interact with our nerve cells. So these cells will interact with nerve endings and tell them, about, what we're feeling and that sort of stuff. They're also, associated with hair follicles and, areas where there's a lot of sensory regarding, touch in particular. That's what Merkel cells really do. So they mostly do occur in areas that are exposed to the sun. So, UV rays, I'm sure, play some sort of role in the genetic events that lead to Merkel cell carcinoma. So, as a matter of background, a lot of skin cancers are caused by UV rays. So UV rays penetrate into our cells, they hit our DNA, and they cause genetic mutations. And a bunch of genetic mutations, mutation after mutation after mutation, from sunburns and just tons and tons of sun exposure, can lead to genetic events that cause our DNA to change in such a way that cells will turn cancerous. They'll be able to grow uncontrollably. So the thought is that Merkel cells are caused by UV rays affecting the Merkel cells, causing the genetic events that could lead to skin cancer. The problem with Merkel cells is when they're found, they're rare, and they're kind of nondescript sometimes on the skin. So it could look like a little pink bump or a little blue bump. But really, that behooves everyone, if you see a new bump on your skin, to get it checked out by your dermatologist, because sometimes a Merkel cell, you kind of are lucky when you catch it. You biopsy a new spot and you're like, oh my God, this is the Merkel cell carcinoma. And if they're caught early, like all skin cancers are almost invariably 100% curable 100% of the time if they're caught early. Problems happen when more aggressive forms of skin cancers like Merkel cells or melanomas, are left to fester a little bit, and then they can spread to lymph nodes and other parts of the body, which is what happened in Jimmy Buffett's case. And then they're very, very hard to manage, and they're frequently quite deadly. So skin cancer is 100% curable 100% of the time if it's caught early. So I'm probably going to say this 10 times during this podcast. But if you notice a bump on your skin that you're not sure about, get it to see your local board-certified dermatologist who could check it out and biopsy it and make sure it is not dangerous. And if it is something that is dangerous and requires further treatment, they can implement that treatment right away to optimize your chances of a positive outcome. So Jimmy Buffett had a metastatic Merkel cell carcinoma, and he had it, I think he had it for 6 years. Don't quote me on that. I don't know what the exact number is, but he had it for several years. And I know he had to cancel his tour in the spring because of some complications he had, most likely related to his metastatic Merkel cell carcinoma. So these are aggressive tumors. They spread pretty rapidly. And the main issue with them is that they're frequently caught too late. So although they're rare, they're bad. They're probably the most aggressive type of skin cancer, more so than even melanoma, which is also a very dangerous type of skin cancer. So I think what we can all take away from this, and it's a horrible loss, and it just seems like a loss of a tremendous human. But fortunately, his energy will continue to live on through his music, and his message will continue to live on through his music for many more generations to enjoy and be positively influenced by. But I think an important takeaway from this tragedy for all of us is to get your skin checked. You should get your skin checked every year. Sometimes it's a good idea to kind of do that around a significant time in your life. Like I get my skin checked for around my birthday every year. I get it checked around Thanksgiving or Christmas or, whatever that, time in your year where you kind of get your doctor's appointments aligned. Skin cancer screening should be one of those things that you do. And the very important caveat to this is if you notice something funny looking on your skin that you're not sure about, make sure you get in to see a board-certified dermatologist ASAP so they can take a look at it, perhaps biopsy it if it looks suspicious, and then treat it if it needs treatment. So that's what I have to say about Merkel cell carcinoma and skin cancer in general. If you do have any questions, any specific questions, obviously I'm more than happy to answer it or answer them. You can just drop them in the comments below, and then we'll fire off a hashtag Ask Dr. Mudgil series post addressing whatever your questions may be. Again, my condolences to all of those folks who are affected by this tragic loss. I hope you all have a wonderful, restful weekend and are regroup and recharge and are just ready to crush the week ahead. Let's get it.